So first, you're gonna have to download the starter file from my description. It is free, and what we'll do is we'll create a background and some nice lighting for our animation. So first, I'm gonna hide the shoe collection, add in a plane, and I'm gonna hit S and 10 to scale it up by 10. Then go to the shading tab, and right here, create a new material, make it background. Now when we do the backgrounds and stuff like that, we always get into an issue, which is avoiding the edge right there. I'm going to show you how to solve this problem. So let's add in a gradient texture. Hit Ctrl T if you have no triangular. Preview the gradient. Right there the gradient is linear. I'm going to make it spherical, and I'm going to get the object coordinates and connect it to the vector. And I'm going to add in a map range there to tweak this. Set it to smoother step. So it's a lot smoother now. Make it 0 and connect this to the alpha right there. Control Shift click on this one to preview it. Go to the material settings, and in the viewport display, make it alpha blend. And this one to alpha clip, turn off show back face. The color is gonna be white. You can give it whatever color. I'm gonna give it full transmission and 0 roughness. Play with this one and bring it back a little bit. So this is for the background. We need nothing else here. Let's rename this to background, just like that, and to move it to a new collection and make it the background elements. Now I'm gonna make a stand for the shoe. So for this, what you can do is you can add a plane, hit tab into the edit mode, scale x-axis. I'm gonna give it 2 loop cuts and randomize the shape a little bit because we're gonna run the subdivisional surface modifier here. And just like that, create a loop cut in the middle, and that is fine. Give 2 levels of subdivisions to this. Then I'm going to add in a solidify modifier to make it thick, just like that. Then I'm going to add another subdivisional surface, make it 2, and this is fine. And you can now keep duplicating these up there until it reaches this bottom of the shoe, just like that. I'm going to scale it up a little bit on the z-axis. Now Shift D to duplicate along the z-axis, and then scale it down a little bit, just like that. Randomize a little bit if you want, because these are rocks and these are not always similar. So just like that, play with the shapes until you get a good result that you like. And these shapes are going to look very satisfying in the render. So hit Shift D, Z again, scale it down a little bit, rotate it, and just keep doing this. Rotate, scale down. Everyone will be able to do this. If you're even a beginner, you can do this easily. But if you go to the cycles rendered view for this and turn on the world, you can see it looks very good. So I'm gonna go back there, and now we need some more elements for the environment. So I'm gonna get the stand for the shoe, and I'm to move it to the background elements collection. Rename it to shoe stand. Shoe stand. Select the background, Shift D to duplicate it, and rename it to little stones. Hit tab and scale them down. Subdivide once and go to geometry nodes. Create a new geometry nodes tree and make it stones. First, what we're going to do is we're going to create some instances, and then we're going to instance some stuff on those instances, which will make sense in a bit. So let's add in a distribute points on faces to get some random instancing. We're getting some points, make it poison disk, bring up the minimum distance value, and play with the seed just like that. Bring up the density a little bit more. Let's add in a instance on points node. Instance on points. Now in the instance, I'm going to add in a curved line. This is going to be the direction, and bring down the length Something like this will be fine. Shift add in a random value here, so it's a float, and the minimum can be 0.4 and the maximum is 1, which is good. So I'm gonna bring down the minimum a little bit more, play with the seed, and there you go. Let's realize these instances now. Resample the curve. Not count is gonna be the length, and make it 0.002 or something. Let's instance some grids on these points. So I'm gonna add another instance on points node right there, and in the instance let's add in a grid. I'm gonna scale this down just like that. Now in the scale I can add something like a random value here, random value, and in the minimum let's make it 0.5 and the maximum can be 1, which is good. Let's add in a vector math here to control the scale of it. Set it to scale. Now if you control the scale, you can see how that's looking. Now after the resample curve, I can add a capture attribute node, connect the geometry to the points there. This is a float value, so in the value I'm going to add in a spline parameter node, and this is going to be the factor. So get the attribute connected to the scale right there. Now you can see the points that are in the bottom are scaled to 0. That's not what I want. So after the factor, I can add a color ramp to invert the values. Add in the color ramp and flip the color ramp. Play with the values until you get something that you want. Just like that will be fine. Now after that, I'm going to add in a realize instances again, because these are instances. These are not real geometries, so we cannot set the position of it. Add in the set position node. In the offset, you can add in a vector math, and in the offset you can add a combined XYZ node because we want the displacement only on the X and Y axis. So add in a noise texture to this, connect it to the Y axis too, add in the reroute, and shift A to add in a vector math to subtract 0.5 because these are displaced from its own origin. So hit a subtract 0.5. Then after the subtract, you can add in a vector math again. Set it to scale to control the whole factor of that. Now of course after the realize instances you can add in a subdivided mesh node to subdivide it and bring down the scale of the whole thing. I'm gonna bring up the scale of this. Yep, that's it. Then after this I'm gonna add in a delete geometry node because I want to delete some faces from there. Set it to face, and in the selection add in a random value node. This is set to boolean, which is what I want. Let's bring down the probability a little bit and add in a subdivisional surface after this to make it smoother. Now what you can do is add in a solidify modifier here and bring down the thickness of it to something that you like, just like that. And you can now add in a bevel modifier or subdivision again if you want to. So now we have this, and you can see there's some gap in between, so we can go to our curved line and bring down the length right there. So if I bring it down just like that, do something like 0.02, and then what I'm going to do is go to the resample curve node, and in the length bring it down to 0.02 or something, so we get more of these things. I'm going to make it 0.015. Now this looks like, play with the solidify and make it a little bit bigger, like 0.015 right here too. You can scale it down by z-axis and bring it up just like that. And this is what it's gonna look like. Add in a scale elements node at the end, scale elements, and scale them up. Just like that. I'm gonna scale them up by z-axis a little bit, and go to the rendered view and see how that looks like. So these add a little bit of detail to the environment, and you can bring down the scale of the displacement here a little bit. And yeah, if you want to do some random rotation, you can go to the instance on points right here, and in the rotation I can add in a random value node, but only for the z-axis. So duplicate this random value node and turn off these to 0. This should be 0 and this one too, and connect the value to the rotation. So now the minimum z rotation can be -1 and the maximum can be 1. Now that's what I want. And now next step is going to be to give the materials and create some cool lighting here. I'm going to go to the shading tab and right here create a new material. This is going to be the stones, and let's add in a geometry node here. Geometry, and the value I want is the random per island here. So now if you go to the cycles and look at the random per island, you can see in every island we have a different float number here. So I can add in a color ramp here now and set it to constant. Bring this value back and add random colors here. Connect it there, and I'm just gonna pick my colors. And this looks good to me. Now this stones material, you can select the geometry nodes object, go to the geometry nodes, and in the end I'm gonna add in a set material node and select the stones here. You can also add in a set shade smooth node to make it smooth. Now you can play with the colors here. I think they look a little bit too saturated. Let's add in a hue saturation value node and bring down the saturation a little bit. I'm gonna play with the colors. You can always edit these background elements. Now what I want to do is do some lighting. So for the lighting, I'm gonna make some gradient texture and an HDR. So go to the world tab right there, and in here go to the surface, select in a background. First I'm gonna add in a gradient texture. Now preview this and hit Ctrl T for these nodes. This is gonna be an easing gradient, so it's very smoother right there, easing. And before that I'm gonna add in a separate XYZ node, separate XYZ. Now turn off that one to see the gradient. I'm gonna connect the Z to the vector, so it's up and down just like that. So after the gradient texture, I'm gonna add in a color ramp here and bring the white value back a little bit so it's a little bit stronger. Put this value there and add in a mix RGB here. So let's mix it with the HDR. So I'm gonna add in an environment texture, Control T, open up the HDR from there. So for that, let's go to the local disk C and program files, Blender Foundation, where is it? Right there, 3.2 there, data files, studio lights, world, and click this bookmarks plus button. So you always get a shortcuts here for the HDRs that are built in with Blender. So I'm gonna select the city.exr and let's preview this now. Let's bring it down by z-axis a little bit, so 0.04. I mean this, and in the Z rotation, let's make it something like 54 or something. Yep, that's good. Add in a math node to this and add something like 0.7. Connect it to the color 1 and collect the color ramp to the color 2 and preview this. Now you can see we got some cool lighting here. It's minimal and yeah, it looks good. I wanted to go for something bright, which always looks good. And if you add some depth of field, it looks amazing then. So what next? We did the lighting. Now in the background strength, let's make it something like 0.7. And this mix can be the saturation. Bring up the factor. Go to the render properties and turn on the transparent in the film. Make it transparent. So I'm gonna add in a camera for a test render. Add in a camera, Control Alt and 0 to position it right there. Turn on depth of field, select the shoe, f-stop down. Let's render a frame. So in my render setting, 50 samples, go to the compositing and I added an alpha over node and it's connected to the second socket right there and a viewer node. So let's see how that looks like. It looks quite clean to me. Like if you look at the background here, it's very smooth and there's no corners and stuff like that we always see in our renders. This is the alpha over white color that we're combining it with the background. One last thing that I wanted to add here was the ripples. You can see this in my render. So I'm gonna select the background plane here, go to geometry nodes, create a new geometry node tree and name it ripples. Hit tab and subdivide it a few times. Then I'm gonna add in a subdivisional surface node or subdivide mesh node. Make it 5 and add in a store named attribute node. And what are we storing? We are storing the proximity of these objects to create the ripples or the waves. So first I'm gonna go to the background collection and get the shoe stand and the little stones right there. Make them relative and join them together with a join geometry node. Get this one too and add in a proximity node. Geometry proximity. Connect the distance to the value right there. In the name, I'm gonna give it any letter I want. So I'm going to type in a T here and go to the shading tab, then select the object here, and this is the background texture. So right there, add an attribute, type T here, and if you go to the material view now and preview this attribute, you can see we got the proximity here. Next thing I want to do is I want to add in a wave texture here to create the waves. Preview the wave texture, connect the color to the vector, bring up the scale a little bit, and there we go. After the color, I'm going to add in a math node to end the waves at some point because we don't need them all over the plane. So make it multiply, and I'm going to get the color and drive it through a map range. Oh, float, connect the color to the value, connect the result to the value right there. You can make it something like smoother step. Now let's invert the values right there. Something like that is looking good. Bring that down, bring up the scale of the waves, and play with the map range. Now if you go to the phase offset of the wave texture, you can see the waves are animating. I'm going to add in a value node here. Type in hash frame divided by 24 or something, and then you can add in the math node to invert the animation. So if I play it, it's going the wrong way if you look at that. So multiply this with a negative number, and now if you play this, it's going the correct way. So that's fine. Let's add in a bump node for the whole thing. So in there, I'm going to add in a bump node, connect this to the height, connect this to the normal, and preview the principled BSDF. We already got the waves, but they're very strong, so I'm gonna bring down the distance to something like 0.02 and bring down the strength too. Now if you play this, it goes in real time, and if you update the whole geometry, the waves are gonna go with it, and yeah, it looks super cool. Now if I save the file and render a frame with this, you can see these little waves. They add this little detail to the whole render, which looks very cool. These are the little things that make your animations look good in the final render. Hey, so you've made it to the second part. In this one, we're going to be creating this beautiful glass effect, and this one is going to be easy. And also, we're going to do the disappearing effect with these two objects. So let's get started. First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these objects, and I think they're way too complex. So right here, if you go to the subdivide mesh node, just remove it from there. And these are pretty simple now. So that's it. And you can add a subdivisional surface to these or a bevel if you want. Both will work perfectly fine. But right now, I'm not adding any of these modifiers here because it will slow down our viewport and we don't want that. So turn off this set shade smooth node from here. If we play our timeline, you can see the FPS is pretty good. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the glass shape. Let's select the camera and move it to a new collection. This is going to be our camera's collection. Hit OK and hide the collection from here. I'm going to hide these two collections too, and then add in a plane here. I'm going to hit Ctrl+3 to give it some subdivisions and make it kind of a circle shape. Then I'm going to right click and subdivide it. Then select these vertices, and you might be thinking why I don't want to add circles here, because I don't like the geometry there. So the planes are good. So just select the border vertices, all of them, leave the middle one, and right click, go to loop tools and make it a circle. You can enable this add-on from preferences right there in the add-ons. Search for loop tools right there, and then save preferences. This is a circular shape now. Next thing I want to do is give it some thickness. Let's add in a solidify modifier and make it thicker, just like that. Then I'm going to add another subdivisional surface, make it 2, and right click and shade that smooth. But in the corners, it looks a little bit weird. Let's select all the faces and insert them. Scale them a little bit, and this is what I want. And next I'm going to add in a curve modifier here. So get a curve. For that I'm going to add in a path curve, because we need a curve for the modifier. Scale this up and give it some random shape just like that. We're gonna edit it later for the animation. Right now we need just a shape. So select the curve right there, and you can see it's here now. But keep in mind that the origin of the curve and the origin of this object should be similar. Then it will work. Now if I move it along the x-axis, you can see it's moving along the path. And the good thing about this curve is if we move it right there and then I select the curve, select the point in the edit mode and hit Ctrl T. So if I twist this, it's gonna twist the whole thing with it. So right here I'm gonna add in a displacement modifier right there and create a new texture. This is gonna be my displacement, and click this button and search for clouds here. Bring the size up something like that. So it cannot go up 2, so I'm gonna type in the number that I want. I'm gonna type in 5 here. Go to the modifiers tab again, and right here select the object coordinates. Then in the middle I'm gonna add in another Bezier circle, scale it up just like that, and in the resolution make it something like 30 or something. Then on the same origin I'm gonna add in an empty. Hit F12 to rename this to the displacement object. Go to the object constraints and select the follow path. Then I'm gonna select the curve circle that we added here, and if I play with the offset now, it's controlling the circular motion of the empty. Now I'm gonna select this object and go to the modifiers. In the displace, I'm gonna select this empty object. So when it moves, it's gonna affect our displacement. But this displacement is doing everything along the normals of this object, and I think we should do this displacement before our solidify. So I'm gonna bring this up right there, and now if you look at it, it looks good. Then right here, if I play with the offset of my constraint, you can see it's affecting my displacement like I did in my video. So we got the control of that. Now I'm gonna select all the objects here and to move it to another collection, because collections are very important. We can keep everything organized and then it will be easy to select and do things. So I'm gonna rename it to the glass leaf. This is what I call it. I think I need one tiny displacement in the end. So let's add in another displacement. So create a new texture for this, and this is gonna be the small displacement. This is just for little details. I'm gonna go to the texture and make the scale to something like 3 or 2 maybe, but the strength is gonna be very low for this one. So 0.05 or 4, bring it up a little bit, and that's gonna be okay. Now I'm gonna select the global coordinates here, and if I move it along the x-axis, it's updating with the position of it. So now I'll bring down the scale. I think 0.1 or something will work. Turn on this displacement too, and we're good to go. We can tweak these values later if we want to. That's gonna be not a problem, because it's all procedural and you can control it the way you want. So before we animate this, let's turn on our collections here and set our curve the way we want. So for my example, I did something like that. I select the whole thing and rotate it just like that. Extrude again, extrude right there, extrude again, remove it from the scene there. I want these points to be in front of the shoe so that it can reveal the invisibility effect. Bring it down just like that. This one can go up. So if I bring it back along the x-axis, right here I'm going to select the curve, go to the points here, Ctrl T to twist it, just like that. So it covers our shoe there. Then I'm going to rotate it there too. I'm going to scale my object, hit tab and S to scale it. Where is it? Right there. Hit S to scale it down. You can bring down the solidify if you want. I'm going to go to solidify and bring it down just a little bit. But I'm getting this weird lines right here. Maybe let's select the curve and go to the curve resolution preview and make it bigger. If you look at it, now let's bring up the resolution preview and render both. Bring it up until these lines are disappeared, just like that. So this is way smoother now. If I grab it along the x-axis, just like that, you can see how that looks like. And we're gonna animate this empty too, because this is the floating type motion of the whole leaf. I'm gonna go to the displacement number 2 and go to the texture, bring down the depth to 0. I don't want it to be very high. And then let's play this. Yep, that's what I want. You can bring up the size of the texture now because the depth is low. So make it something like 4. Bring it down. And that's it. Let's go to the shader editor and create a new material for this. This is gonna be our glass leaf. Pretty cool. Now right here, I'm gonna turn up the transmission, bring down the roughness to 0, and in the color, let's add in a noise texture. Connect the color to the base color. Now go to the shading preview mode and let's preview this noise color. So it's a lot bigger. I want it to be very small size, so just like that. It looks quite satisfying to me. This is gonna work. You can add in the hue saturation node to change the whole thing if you want. If you play with the hue now, it will change the colors a lot. So something like that would work fine. Now I'm gonna preview the principled BSDF, go to the cycles preview mode. Now one thing I did for the glass was added some volume to this. Volume absorption, I think. Yeah, that was it. Connect this to the volume, and in the density, let's make it something like 7. And I'm gonna make it totally white, and I want a reddish kind of color here. But if you look at it, it's very dim. The lighting is not very brighter. So what you can always do is click on this V value, which is the brightness of the texture, and make it something like 5. You can see it's a lot brighter now and it looks awesome. So you can bring it down to 3 or 4 to make it a little bit subtle. I'm gonna connect this to the color, and this will be it for the texture of this thing. You can bring up the value right there too. And this was a great idea to reveal the whole thing, because if I did the invisibility effect without this glass, it will just look very boring. What I want to do next is prepare these materials to be disappeared, right? So for that, we need only these ones. And what I did with the shaders here, it's already done, but you can do this with any object or any material. So after the principled VST or the last mix shader of your material, what you can do is you can add in another mix shader here, and in the shader number 2, give it a transparent BSDF. And for the factor, we're going to use an attribute that we are going to output from our geometry nodes, and its name is V right there. So it's used for all the materials in there. This one and this one too. You can see the same setup, and for these two. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all these objects one by one and give them a geometry node system to output the proximity attribute. So I'm going to go to geometry nodes first and create a new geometry node system here. This is going to be the invisibility effect. Right here, what you want is a controller for the effect to just, move it, and it will control the whole effect. So I'm going to pin this and create an empty here. I'm going to get a sphere here, bring it up, and F2 to rename it to something like gradient control. And then you want to go to the viewport display and turn on the name for it, so you can always know what is this empty used for. Right click, adjust empty size, and bring it down. I'm going to import this to the setup here, and let's move it to this collection. So M glass leaf thing. This is going to be relative, and then I'm going to add in a mesh line here. Mesh line. This mesh line is only going to be 1 point, and the location of this empty is going to be the location of the point. So that's obvious. Wherever we move the empty, the point is going to move with it. I learned this from Decky3D, from one of his tutorials, so thanks to him. Let's add in a proximity node, geometry proximity, and connect this to the target. So we have only 1 point here, so we don't have any faces. I'm going to select points here, and right there, let's add in a store named attribute node. Store named attribute, and its name is going to be V, because we are outputting V in the shader editor. So this is V, and connect the distance to the value. And now if I go to the shader editor and preview the material, you can see if I move the empty now, it's affecting the whole thing, which is what I want. But if I go to geometry nodes now I want this effect to be a little bit larger, and this is just in a very small circles. Let's add in a math node and bring it back just like that until you get the whole shoe. And now you can add in a map range too to make it smoother. Set it to smoother step, and let's see how that looks like. So if I move the controller, let's go to the material properties, and in the blend mode, let's make it alpha blend and turn off show bake face. In the shadow mode, I'm gonna make it alpha clip. You need to go to every material and set the blend mode to alpha blend and the shadow mode to alpha clip. So this disappearing effect will look good. Now if I select my gradient control and move it, you can see it's controlling my shoe. And I'm gonna go to geometry nodes there again, and let's just add a little bit more of that here. So that is totally covering our shoe. Maybe let's just remove this map range, bring this value back a little bit more, and now if I move my controller empty, you can see that's how it's looking like. And that's the whole effect. And now let's give this geometry node system to all these objects so that they can also get the attributes here. Give it a geometry nodes modifier and select our invisibility effect right there. Now let's move it away so that we can see how it's looking like. I'm gonna select this material too, and right there go to the blend mode, make it alpha blend. Right here alpha clip, show bake face turn off. Select this object, give it the geometry node system invisibility effect, go to the material, alpha blend, alpha clip, show bake face turn off, and this object too. And I'm gonna just join this object with this one, so they're just one object. So this is one object now. And if I move the empty now, you can see it's disappearing the whole thing. And I'm gonna select this object, go to the edit mode, select the vertices and grab them along the x-axis because I think there is a gap between there, in between there. Select this face and grab x-axis. Now that's okay. So whenever this glass thing moves in front of this shoe, we're gonna move this gradient control empty. Let's do one more thing. As you saw in the video, I have a depth of field on this object. So for that, I need an empty, and it needs to be parented to this object. But it's moving with a curve, so we want to parent it to the vertices instead. So I'm gonna hit tab, select all the vertices, Control G to assign to a new group, and hit tab again. And then I'm gonna bring my cursor here, shift add an empty. This can be a cube. Adjust the size, F2 to rename it to the depth of field glass. Then I'm going to go to its viewport display and turn on the name of it so that we can see what is this doing. Then I'm going to go to the constraints tab and add in a child of constraint. Then this one I'm going to select my glass here, and in the vertex group let's just select the group, set inverse. And I can move this now, and then let's move this along the x-axis and it will move with the whole thing. But right here I don't want the scale, I also don't want the rotation with this thing. And then I'm gonna set inverse again. So now if I move it along the x-axis, x-axis, you can see what it's doing. The object is parented to it and it's all set. Save the file, and yep, that's it for this first shot. We're gonna animate the whole thing later because first we need the whole background and all the elements to be ready. So select the depth of field object, move it to the glass leaf collection. Now let's do a test render from that. Bring it back just like that, and I'm gonna bring my camera right in front of the leaf here. Okay, let's select the curve, shift S cursor to selected, then select this object too, and then I'm gonna go to right here and select 3D cursor. Then RZ and something like that. Rotate it so it's the same angle that I used for my animation. Select the curve, edit it a little bit, Control T to twist. Now go to the camera view and bring it down and do whatever you want. I'm gonna select the curve again and twist this thing. Then go to the first displacement here and bring the strength of it up a little bit. I'm gonna tweak the texture a little bit. Then select the camera and go to the depth of field settings, and I'm gonna select my depth of field glass object. And then let's go to the rendered view and see how that looks like. Go to the shader editor, and right here, I think the saturation is a little bit too much. I'm gonna bring the density down to 3. or 5 is gonna be good. This V can be 2, and let's bring the saturation down here to something like 0.4. I'm gonna select my depth of field glass object and grab it right here. Open up 3D viewport here, and I'm gonna grab it right there because it's a little bit up now. So grab it right here, near to the camera a little bit. I'm gonna select the camera again and go to the depth of field settings. So the f-stop, let's make it 0.2, and the blades 5, and I don't know what these values are used for, so just leave them. Let's render out a frame and see how that looks like. Oh, that is beautiful. But you can see the shoe is already in the background, but we're gonna hide it in the render, and it's very easy, just one click. And it looks very beautiful. Especially the whole depth of field, and when it combines with it, the glass looks amazing. Let's make this V to 3 again, bring up the density of it. I think our solidify value is still a little bit high. So go to solidify, and it's negative 0.056. I'm gonna make it negative 0.04. Yep, this is good now. The second displacement is 0.04, make it 0.03. That's also good. Then I'm gonna go to the shoe collection, and this is our body, so I'm gonna turn off the render for it for now. And let's render a frame again. So this is part 2, and I'll see you in the next part. So this is where we left. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hide the unnecessary collections to make things easier, and hide the camera, hide the background elements, and hide the shoe collection too. I've made another collection for this simulation, which I'll provide with the starter file. So right here you will see only this object, which is used for the collisions. I'm gonna turn on the shoe collection, hide the body, and if you see, it fits in there. So we're gonna simulate our bubbles inside of this cage mesh. So there's an object I given you in the starter file, which is named as sim. It has a very simple geometry node system because I've done this in the previous tutorial and I don't want to do it again. So it's a distribute points on faces and instance some cubes on those points. Then I'm controlling the scale of those with a noise texture and some random value and with a math node. From 100 to 113 they're scaling up. This is a subdivisional surface, levels of 2. I realized the instances shade smooth and set material. This is all of it, and added another subdivision to make them smoother and give them some resolution. Select this object and go to the collision. Turn on this collision on that. Uncheck single-sided and bring it down the friction to 0. I'm going to select my bubbles object, give it a cloth physics. Quality steps, make it 10. Vertex mass, this is going to be 3 kg, and the bending, make it 10. This bending, make it 10 too. And right there in the pressure, make it 600. And now I'm gonna go to the frame start. This is gonna be 100 frame, and in the end we're gonna end the simulation with 150 frame. So from 100 to 150. And now save the file, and we're gonna come down to the shape. So in the shape, turn on dynamic mesh, and in the collisions, give it 15 in the quality. Distance can be something like 0.0015, and the self collisions, make it 0.002 or something. Go to the property weights, and in the max bending, make it 20. Now in the field weights, bring the gravity down to 0. And that is it, I think, for all of the settings. If you go to the 100th frame and go to the cloth physics tab, save the file and bake the data. So let's play the simulation and let's see how that looks like. And I think it is looking perfect. I'm gonna give it 1 level of subdivisions at the end. So hit Ctrl 1. Why is it not there? Let's add in a subdivisional surface and 1 levels. This is it. Now let me show you what I did for the material, which is the bubbles material. If you go to the shading tab, and this is the bubbles selected here, I added only a geometry node here, and I'm using the random per island here. So if you go to the rendered view for that and preview the random per island, this is just a random float value for every island here. So if we give it this constant color ramp and some random colors. This is gonna give us that, and then I'm gonna make some of them transparent with some transmission going on and connect this to the base color and prove that. Then I have the volume absorption, but right here in the V value I entered 2 instead of 1, so it's a little bit more brighter and emissive than it would be in a normal mode. And roughness is 0. This is all for this material. I did nothing else for that, and this looks pretty cool, right? And for this object, if you turn off all the modifiers, it is just this plane. It's very weird, but I just distributed some points in there and it looks good. So this is it for the simulation part. Very simple. These 2 objects are going to be available in my starter file, which you've already downloaded, I know. You can change the index if your simulation is not looking good. So go to geometry nodes and change this index, this one right here too, and even if you go to the last frame here, you can change the value, make it something smaller if your bubbles are going outside the mesh. So that will be it. Look at the render and see how it looks like. So I'm gonna hide the soft body collider, and yep, this is it for the materials and the simulation, and I'll see you in the next part. Now let's add the knitting effect to the shoe. So you're gonna select this body object because we want it on this one, and hit tab in to go to the edit mode. And now you should select these faces right there, which are on the upper side of the mesh, because we want the effect on these vertices only. So somehow you need to select these faces right there, and then go to the vertex groups and create a vertex group for that. I think it will be already created, so if you have another object or another project file, then you need to do it yourself and assign the vertex group right here. Then after that, go to add modifier and geometry nodes. Now with this file, I'm gonna provide the knitting effect, which I've already done in my previous tutorial. So if you wanna learn how to do it, you can follow the tutorial, and if you just want the file, you can get it from here. It is the knitting v2, and in the selection you're gonna click this button and select the no points group. So this is all you need to do. Now let's turn on the knitting collection. It will be available with the starter file. We have a knitting control here, so if I move this controller, you can see what's happening. We're controlling the knitting effect with it, and this empty is used for the control of these threads, so you can move them wherever you want, just like that. And now the knitting effect is done, so I'm gonna click this button and hide the geometry nodes modifier for now because we don't want it. We're gonna use it later. And hide the collection too. Now let's start animating the whole thing. So first what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go right there to the render properties, and I'm gonna turn on the simplify and leave the render. We don't want that. So in the max subdivisions, make it 0 or make it 1, I guess. Child particles, make it 0. The volume resolution, make it 0. So this is all we need for the simplify settings, but keep in mind we're gonna turn that off in the render. Now if you play the viewport, it's still fast enough to animate things. Now I'm gonna remove this tab from here, and there we have our timeline. I'm gonna turn on my background elements collection and the cameras collection. Also, let's turn on the glass leaf collection and hide the simulation collection. And now let's start making the animation. First, we need an empty to control the camera, because we don't want to control the camera with any curves and stuff like that. We just need only one empty. So for that, let's go right there and Shift S cursor to selected. Hit Shift A and add in an empty. You can add any empty you want, but I'm gonna add a cube here. And now F2 to rename this, make it cam controller. And I'm gonna move this to the cameras collection right there. Now let's move it to the middle of the shoe right here. And that is good. Now next thing I want to do is hit Alt G and Alt R in the camera to reset the rotation and location of the camera. Now let's rotate it 90 degrees by the x-axis and bring it back along the y-axis. Now in this tab I'm gonna get my 3D viewport, and this is gonna be my camera view. So go to the camera and the viewport display. Let's make this pass part out 1. Hide all these overlays from here, and this is what our scene would look like. Let's animate this thing. So for that, what we want to do is we just want to move it along the x-axis and it will work fine. But first, we need to animate this because it was used for the displacement of the leaf. So if I move it, it will displace my leaf. So first, let's add another driver for this. So type in hash frame divided by 150 or something. So I think it's very slow now. So I'm gonna divide it by something like 24, and let's play this now. It's still very slow, so let's divide it by something like 5. I think this is good. Maybe make it 4. I'm gonna go to the displacement 1 strength and bring it down to something like 1.2. Go to the texture and bring down the scale of it, just like that. So bring it back along the x-axis and see how that looks like. My leaf object is acting weird because I didn't apply the rotation after rotating it 180 degrees. So Ctrl A and apply rotation. Now select your leaf object and grab it along the x-axis, and this should work perfectly fine. Let's edit the curve a little bit more suitably to the scene. I'm gonna do it just like that and Ctrl T on that to twist it. I think it's still a little bit bigger, so go into the edit mode and scale it down from the median point just a little bit. I think that's gonna be enough. If we needed more scale, then we can scale it up again, but that should be okay. Now grab it along the x-axis to bring it there to the camera and go to the camera view. Select the camera first, then select the camera controller. And then I'm gonna go to the viewport display and turn on the name for the camera controller so that we know what object are we selecting. Then hit Ctrl P, keep transform. And now if I rotate or move my empty, it's gonna move my camera with it, and we can control lots of things with that, like the zooming with the scaling, the location, just like that, and the rotation, of course, which is pretty cool. Now, first, let's scale this empty a little bit so the camera is far away from the shoe. Let's select the camera and go to the shading tab here. I'm gonna go to the camera settings and turn off depth of field because we don't need it for now. And I'm gonna bring this camera up just a little bit. And this should be okay. Now let's select the curve and bring this handle up just like that. Bring this one up and select the empty again, scale it up so it's a little bit far from the camera. I'm gonna bring that up a little bit and twist this one. Grab it down and Ctrl T to twist it. But one more thing. I'm gonna select my camera and go to the focal length. Make it 85 because this is what I used, I think. Now let's scale the empty a little bit more so it's zooming back just like that. Now you can select the bigger circle that is used for the displacement, and you can offset the displacement just like that. And I'm gonna select my curve and adjust it to the camera. Save the file and go to the frame 1 now. Now if you play this, it's gonna look like that. We're gonna do some keyframing here now. Go to the displacement texture and bring the size down a little bit more. I think 2.5 will be good. So now let's play it again. This looks good. Let's bring down the strength to 1. We're animating only the X location, so click this button to insert a keyframe on the X location and bring it back right here to the 50 frame. The X-axis, so move it out of the camera just like that and then insert the keyframe again. So we got this animation now. Let's go to the graph editor and fix this. I want it to be fast at the start and then slow down at the end. So select this keyframe, select the second handle and bring it back along the x-axis, just like that. Then select this one and bring it back along the x-axis right here. If you look at it, it's starting fast just like that, and then it just slows down right here. I'm gonna bring this back to the 40th frame, bring this back a little bit, and now let's play this and see how that looks like. So you can see it's starting fast, but the offset is not looking very good, so I'm gonna select my bigger circle again. Let's bring it up just a little bit from the ground so that we can select things, rotate it along the z-axis to get a good offset. So now let's go for this and play it. Try different things until you get the result you want. So in this scene, I didn't just animate this thing, but I also animated the camera with it. Now let's go to the displacement modifier for this and adjust it to 2.8. I'm gonna offset my circle, so rotate it along the z-axis. I'm just looking for a better displacement. I'm gonna select the leaf thingy and bring the displacement strength up to 1.3 again. Okay, we're gonna change this later, but let's animate the camera too, because I think I'm wasting time here. So in the first frame, select the object, the cam controller, and insert location, rotation, and scale everything. On the 20th frame, scale it down a little bit, and I'm gonna rotate it just like that. Insert location, rotation, and scale. So let's see how that looks like. Bring up the camera a little bit to fix that. Select the curve and bring it down. And now let's play this again. I'm gonna select this object, scale it back just a little bit like that, and insert location, rotation, and scale. And I think I'm gonna rotate it that way. So insert location, rotation, and scale. Now select this object, grab x-axis, move it out of the camera just like that. I'm gonna go to the x location and insert it again. It's zooming in a lot, so I'm gonna select this object and go to the 20th frame, scale it back a little bit so the object is in focus, and insert the keyframes. Yes, I think this is looking good. So now I don't want the camera to just stop after the frame 20, so let's go to frame 15 and insert location, rotation, and scale. Now I'm gonna select these two keyframes, bring them back to the 20 frame, select the second one and bring it right there to the 40th frame. Now if I play it, you can see how that looks like. Now let's go to the graph editor and fix this. So I'm gonna get the graph editor from there. Graph editor. If you look at the keyframes, they are already looking very smooth. And now if I play it, it looks like that. Let's bring it down just a little bit, and just like that. Then I'm gonna select all of these keyframes right here. These are used for the scale, I think. So if I play with it, it's the controlling the whole scale of it. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring it down along the y-axis. So grab y-axis and bring it down a little bit. Select this one and bring it up along the y-axis just a little bit. Now I'm gonna select these ones, B2, box select, and I'm gonna hit shift and deselect these ones. So G x-axis, just like that. Select these keyframes, B2, box select, and deselect those with holding the shift button, and I'm gonna bring it right there. Now I'm gonna select these keyframes too, then click B for the box select, hold shift and just box select that, and it will be deselected. Then I'm gonna bring that back along the x-axis just like that. This is gonna be enough. Now let's play this and see how this looks like. So I think the starting point is not very far, so what I'm gonna do is scale it up a little bit more, just like that, and insert location, rotation, and scale. Then I want this object to be out of the camera, so for that, let's select this keyframe and I'm going to bring it up just like that. Grab y-axis, so it's out of the camera now. Select this keyframe and bring it back just like that. I'm gonna go to the displacement texture here, give it some depth. Now I'm gonna go to my outliner here and hide the body object from my render and also hide the simulation and the knitting effect from my render. Save the file and then I'm gonna select my camera, go to the camera settings and turn on depth of field. And now this is how it looks like with the depth of field. Now let's do a test render. But we need to hide the whole shoe collection in the render because this is still not appeared with the disappearing effect right there. I'm gonna go to my graph editor again. I'm gonna need total 450 frames here. I'm gonna go to frame 32 on this object, go to the location keyframe, and in the location X, insert again here. I'm gonna select it and bring it down slightly. And now one thing, the camera shouldn't stop either. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get these two keyframes, bring them back to the 50 frame. I'm going to get the middle one and bring it back a little bit, just like that. And now if I play it again, my camera is a little bit up, so bring it down so it's on the middle. I'm going to select my camera controller here. In this one, scale it up a little bit. Insert location, rotation, and scale. Now play it again. So maybe let's bring it back to 70 frame and get this one, bring it back to 70 frame too. From here I want to move it fast. I think 90 frame is going to be good for that. And let's duplicate that one. Let's select the curve here, bring the handles in a little bit. Bring it near to the shoe, just like that. So I'm gonna go to frame 5 and select all of these keyframes because we've edited our curve. Now we need to offset all of these. So grab y-axis, I'm gonna grab it down a little bit, just like that. Let's come back to this one and edit it a little bit. So I'm gonna rotate this keyframe, scale it up just like that, and I'm gonna bring this one right there to the 100th frame. It's floating like that, but I don't want this kind of motion, so we want to tilt our curve for that. Now you're gonna need to be very patient in this process because this needs lots of tweaking, and that's why a lot of people don't want to do these tutorials. I'm gonna select this handle, hit Ctrl T to twist it, just like that. Then when we move there, move this handle back a little bit, and then hit Ctrl T again. And play it just like that. And now if I play again, but right here I want to twist it this way, so let's Ctrl T and twist it like that and play it again. I think I want to twist this one the other way, so hit Ctrl T for that and twist it just like that, and now play it back. So this is how it's gonna go. I'm gonna hit Alt T on this point, and now let's twist it that way slightly and play it again. Now as this object moves fast, I want to move the camera with it. So it's gonna be a sweet transition to the shoe. Let's go to the graph editor and select the camera controller. So I'm gonna select all the keyframes of it and hit the del key. So we have them here. Go to the 100th frame or 94 or something. I'm gonna scale this down just like that and hit double R to rotate it right here. Then I'm gonna hit I and insert location, rotation, and scale. We have selected these keyframes, then I'm gonna hit B, hold shift and select that to remove it. Bring this back a little bit, select these keys, B, shift, select, grab along the x-axis back just like that. These keyframes are rising a little bit because if you grab them back along the x-axis, this is what happens all the time. Or you can just scale them along the y-axis 0. Scale it along the y-axis 0. So it's coming very near to the camera, so what I'm gonna do is go back to the curve and edit it. Let's select the camera controller and I'm gonna select the keyframe, bring it to the 100th frame right there. So it starts like that, and then it moves, and then it stops again. But if you look at the camera position, I think it's not right. So what I'm gonna do for that is, let's select the original camera controller object. Let's go to its delta transforms, and in the Z location, I'm gonna bring it up a little bit. So it's covering all of our shoe. And we don't need any keyframes here because if you have animated an object and then you want to change the Z location of it, and then you have to go to every single keyframe and then change it there. But if you go to the delta transforms and you don't want to touch it again, so you can just offset your animations from here. Looking pretty good. So I think the camera is scaling faster than the object entering the scene. So for that, what I'm going to do is select this keyframe, bring it back to the 20th frame and play it again. Then what I'm going to do is select this one, go to the graph editor again, and I'm going to grade them along the y-axis up a little bit. So I'm going to select this object now and I'm going to scale it up, insert location, rotation, and scale. Then go to this frame right here, scale it up a little bit more, insert location, rotation, and scale. Then go to frame 0 and scale it up more than that and insert location, rotation, and scale. So this is very near to the camera, so I'm going to scale it up a little bit just like that, insert location, rotation, and scale. I think it's kind of stopping here, so I'm going to scale it down again. And just like that. Rotate it a little bit, you know, and insert location, rotation, and scale. Let's play it again. Yep, this is the movement I want. Go to the 100, scale the empty up, just like that. Insert location, rotation, and scale. So I want to slow down this animation at this point right there. Let's select the curve here, hit tab, and I'm going to select the point right there. So let's twist this one a little bit. Then I'm going to twist this one too. Then twist this one. And then hit tab again to go to the object mode. This is how it's looking. So if you look at that right here, it's going out of the camera. So what I'm going to do is just edit the curve. So select these points right there, hit Alt T on them, so we're removing all the twist from that. And then I'm going to twist it back, but in another way. So now we gotta edit the offset again. So select this object right there, and when it stops, it should be in the middle. So select every keyframe, grab y-axis back, and just like that. Now play it again, and this should be fine. Now this should move very slow, so for that what I'm gonna do is go to the graph editor again and duplicate this keyframe down there. Oh, it's stopping there. So let's rotate this keyframe and make it smoother so it won't stop there. Now this is still not very smooth, so I'm gonna bring it back along the x-axis, bring this one just like that. Let's select and twist it. So I'm gonna hit Ctrl T for that, bring it up a little bit, go to the camera view and play it again. Oh yeah, we got it. Okay, I'm gonna bring it back to 150. So this object is moving a little bit slow. What I'm gonna do for that is select this object too, select these keyframes here, and bring them back to 90. And grab x-axis to make it slower. Select this thing, grab it along the y-axis, move, slow, move, bring it back to 150. So what we should do now is insert this right there in the 140. I'm gonna select the second one, which is on 150, bring it down just like that. And now this is how it's gonna look like. So now right there, when it goes here, if you look at it, my camera is stopping just very fast. Let's go to frame 140 and scale this down a little bit, rotate it, insert location, rotation and scale. Then go to frame 90, bring up the scale a little bit and insert location, rotation and scale. Now let's see how that's looking. So after frame 90, I want it to scale a little bit smooth, so for that, let's select all of these keyframes, B to remove these, and bring them back just like that. Now play it again. Okay, I can scale the camera controller a little bit more, so scale it down just like that, RR to rotate it, insert location and rotation and scale. Save the file, play it. Let's go to frame 110, select the object and insert location, rotation and scale. Then I'm going to move this keyframe to the 90 frame right there. But I'm going to scale it up just a little bit, just like that. Insert location, rotation and scale. Go back. Let's bring it back to 135 and select this object. I'm going to bring these two back right there to 135. Then I'm going to select my camera thing and on the 145 frame, rotate my camera just like that and scale it up. I'm going to insert location, rotation and scale. It comes in, it moves fast, slow, and go back. But I want the camera to go back just like that and then slow down and go back in. So for that, let's go to 160 frame, scale it up a little bit just like that, insert location, rotation, and scale. Now on the 180 frame, let's scale it down just like that, insert location, rotation, and scale. But one more thing, I want a controller for the whole shoe. So whenever I move that object, it's gonna move the shoe with it. Or what we may just do is select all the objects. Then at last I'm gonna select my sole object. Control P, keep transformation. Now if I move the sole, it's gonna move my shoe. So select this object. I want it to come back a little bit aggressively, like fast. Select these two keyframes, hit del key in the graph editor so we get these keys. So let's select that and bring these back just like that. So after 175 frame, let's select the sole object and insert location and rotation. We only want to rotate and locate it. Go to X. Let's go to 185 frame. Bring it up. Rotate it just like that too. Insert location and rotation. Now if you select this empty on the 185 frame, select this, snap it to the 185 and grab it up just like that. Rotate it along the Z-axis. Insert location, rotation, and scale. Oh, so the 160 and the 185 frame of this camera controller should be same for the shoe sole. Then it's gonna work, I think. So let's select this object and go to 160 frame. Then I'm gonna select the sole and snap this keyframe to 160 right there. Now if I do this, it's gonna look good. In this frame, maybe RXX and insert location, rotation, and scale. Okay, maybe on 170 frame. Let's select the second frame here, bring it back to 170, then select the sole and bring this keyframe to 170 just like that. Now let's play with the graph editor here to make this look good. Select these keyframes, remove them, and bring these back just like that. Then I'm gonna select these, select only this side and bring it back a little bit. Then select the controller object and select these two keyframes, hit del, then I'm going to select this one and bring it back a little bit. Select this one, bring this one back, just like that. Scale Y and 0. Select these keyframes, just like that. Grab Y axis, back. Select these ones, B, and remove these. Just grab them back a little bit. Now I don't want it to stop there. I just want it to slow down at this point. Select the camera controller object, go to frame 180 and hit double R for this and rotate it a little bit. And I'm gonna grab it to just fit in there, rotate it along the Z-axis a little bit, insert location, rotation, and scale. Then go to 170 frame, scale it up a little bit because I think it's very near to the camera. Insert location, rotation, and scale again. Oh, okay. Let's select these two, remove them, and bring these two back a little bit. So it's kind of slow there. So if you select the camera controller here, I think it's rotating in this point. So R and double X and rotate it from here just a little bit. Insert rotation, location, rotation, and scale, all of them. And if you look at that now, okay, so there's a little bit of problem with the keyframes, but I'm gonna fix that. Select these two, and now let's see what's wrong with that. Now select this one. Okay, these keyframes should be back there. So select these two and grab the first handle back just like that. And I'm going to select the camera controller here and bring the last keyframe to something like 200. Now play it. I'm gonna hit R and double X just a little bit, insert location, rotation, and scale. R, X, X on this point, insert location, rotation, and scale. Let's look at the FPS. It's still pretty good. Now what I need to do is rotate it along the Z-axis, and then I'm gonna start knitting it. So let's do one more thing here. It's coming here, and then in the 210th frame, rotate it along the Z-axis just like that. Grab it to the middle, scale it up, and let's rotate it just like that a little bit. Insert location, rotation, and scale. Then I'm going to select the sole object, select this keyframe, Shift T to duplicate it to 200. Now let's hit double R to rotate the shoe and make it different. R, Z-axis, insert location and rotation. And now let's play this. Boom, rotate. But I want this rotation to be a little bit more juicy, so for that, select these two keyframes, go to the graph editor. Let's select these ones and hit B, remove them, grab them back, select that one, scale Y and 0. Now select these one by one, scale Y 0, scale Y 0, Shift R, Shift R, Shift R, Shift R. Now select these keyframes and grab that back just like that. If you look at this now, you can see it's a little bit different now. But at the end it's stopping, which I don't like. So on the 230 frame, or maybe 250, hit double R, rotate it a little bit and scale it up just like that. Insert location, rotation, and scale. Then on the frame 210, scale it down a little bit because I don't want to scale it all the way there. And insert location, rotation, and scale. Now play this one. Okay, let's scale it down a little bit and insert the keyframes. And now I want to edit this frame because I think this looks a little bit bad. So go to the Z rotation frame. So these are just a little touches that make your animations look good. Then I'm going to go to this one, select this one now and rotate it just a little bit. Scale it up, move this one back just like that. Save the file. Now do it again. Yeah, this is looking good. But if you see here this object, I want to hide it now. Okay, go to frame 140 and bring this down. On the 139, I'm going to add in a keyframe here for the visibility. So insert these two, go to 140 frame and hide it from the viewports and the renders and insert the keyframes. And now it's going to look like that. Save the file. It comes in, moves, slows down, back, removed from the scene. Now let's do the knitting effect. Maybe after 225 we can start a knitting. So let's turn on the geometry nodes on that and go to the outliner, turn on the knitting effect from here. And there we have it. So select the knitting controller. Let's move it up a little bit and insert location, rotation, and scale. And grab x-axis just like that. Insert location, rotation, and scale. I'm gonna bring the first one to 225. Snap to current frame. So with the knitting effect, the viewport is kind of slow now, so I'm gonna go to geometry nodes, turn this switch up to 1, and then go to geometry nodes right there. Select them first, the mesh boolean, the separate geometry, join geometry, and subdivide mesh, and hit M to mute them. And there you go. So I'm gonna select my knit control. I'm gonna go to 251, select the camera controller and scale it down right there. Let's bring it right here. Double R to rotate it a little bit. and insert location, rotation, and scale. Then go to frame 280, scale it down a little bit, insert location, rotation, and scale. And now if we play it, it moves like that. If we go to the graph editor, let's edit this too. I'm gonna hit T and just make it, I think, linear. So after this frame to 280, let's bring it along the x-axis back, just like that, and move it out of the frame this way. Insert location, rotation, and scale. And now if we play it, it's a little bit faster. Okay, let's select the camera controller and bring the last keyframe to 300. Select it, G, like that. Go to 300th frame and select the knit controller next, and this keyframe, bring it back to 300. Now if we play this, so on the 250, if you look at it, it's already covered a lot of area, so I'm gonna bring it back a little bit, GX, just like that. Insert location, rotation, and scale. I think this is looking good. So after this frame, I want to animate the last thing here. So 301, let's reset the positions for all of those. So on the 301, I'm going to select my knit controller and bring it away from the shoe. Insert location, rotation, and scale. Select the sole here, get the last keyframe from there and duplicate it to 300th frame. Now on the 301, I'm gonna get the first keyframe from there and duplicate it, right click, snap to current frame. So it's sitting already on the stones. Select the camera controller, go to the very first frame and duplicate it. Snap to current frame. This was it, and now I want to reset the rotation, so hit Alt R and let's rotate it a little bit. Scale it down just like that. Rotate along the Z-axis. Insert location, rotation, and scale. Then let's move to 450 frame and just scale it back just like that. Double R to rotate it this way. Insert location, rotation, and scale. Okay, let's polish the shots now and do things that are still missing. So first, when we go right here, I want to do the disappearing effect. So I'm going to go to the outliner right there and go to the glass leaf collection. So here we have a gradient control object. I'm going to turn on my overlays and let's hide the shoe body for now. So go to the body and hide it. Let's go right here and go to the rendered view or the material preview mode, whatever you want, and let's turn off the render visibility for the knitting collection. And now we have the gradient controller right here. If I move this controller, you can see what it's doing. My shoe is disappearing. But here's the problem. You can see these black things right there, which is the problem with the transparency. We just have a little bit less sampling on the transparency. So go to the light paths and in the max bounces, turn up the transmission transparent to something like 20. And now if you look at that, our issue is gone. Let's animate this gradient control with the glass. So for that, I'm gonna go back a little bit where it starts to cover our shoe. So come right here and bring back the gradient control object. Just like that along the x-axis. This is how it's gonna be. Bring it back. And now if you turn off the overlays, there's nothing there, and insert location keyframe on that. Then move forward a little bit over here, grab along the x-axis, hide the overlays. But before that, let's go to the camera and turn off the depth of field so that we can see our stuff better. Select the gradient control object and grab it along the x-axis. Now I'm going to insert in a location keyframe, move forward and then gray x-axis again. Just cover the area which comes inside the mirror. In the location, just a little bit more, and gray x-axis, and make it full. So just bring it back to the middle of the shoe and in the location. Now if you look at it, this is how it's gonna look like. Very cool. It comes like that, and now in this frame I'm gonna bring it back a little bit and insert location, and just check out the keyframes and make sure it looks good. It's looking a little bit bad because we've turned on our simplify, and if I turn it off, you can see how it's looking. It's very smooth now and it looks a lot better. So I'm gonna turn it on for now because we don't want our viewport to be slow. So leave that right there and turn on the render region for now. Now if you look at this, save the file, and when it goes back just like that, I want to start my simulation from there. So maybe something like 140. So now what we want to do is go to the simulation collection, turn it on, turn on the render visibility for it, and select the sim object. Select those keyframes, grab them to 140 just like that, and go to the simulation settings. It's the cloth, and I'm gonna scroll down, delete the bake, and set the start frame to 140, and the end frame to something like 190. So this is gonna be good for that, and I'm gonna go to the object properties for this object, and then we're gonna go to the visibility. So before 140, I want this to be disappeared. Like I don't want it be in the camera. On the 140 frame, I'm gonna insert the viewports and renders keyframe here. Then go back to 139, turn off both of those and insert them again. So after 140, it's gonna appear right there. Go to the bake and let's go to the camera controller object and the sole of the shoe. Select all the keyframes for it. Before the 160, I'm gonna select these ones too, and let's bring them back to 190 just like that. I'm gonna go to the last keyframe here and bring it back to 450. And now if I play this, it's gonna go back. Yeah, this is what I want. So let's give the simulation some different index, and I think the scale is a little bit bigger, so for that let's go to geometry nodes, in here, geometry nodes, and now in the math node we have the scale. So right there, let's make it something like 0.7 and insert the keyframe. Then let's play with the seed of the thing. I'm gonna give it a few more instances, so bring the density maximum to something like 60. Let's go to the properties again, and let's bring this keyframe bake to 155 right there. Now let's go to the bake settings, delete the bake, and save the file, bake again. Okay, let's try this now. Play it, and well, that's actually pretty good. But it's not filling in the object. Let's just give it more instances. Go to geometry nodes, and we can go back just like that to frame 140, and in the distance minimum or the density maximum, let's give it something like 100. So you have some more instances, and the distance minimum, make it 0.15 or something. See, we got a lot more instancing going on. Let's play with the seed a little bit, and I'm happy with this one, so go to the properties once again, delete the bake, and bake again. Oh, that is looking good. But I'm getting this pinching here. Okay, let's let's fix this. Or let's go to the cloth pressure, and in the pressure settings, delete the bake first. Make the pressure to something like 700. Then go to the geometry nodes and the instances. Let's go to timeline here. Come back to 140. Make the instances something like 70. Make the distance minimum to something like 0.16 and go to properties here, save the file and bake again. I'm just trying to find a good look for the bake. If you're seeing any issue in my audio, that's because I'm using a denoiser for the voice and it uses my GPU, so it may cause my voice to crash or something. Okay, let's go to timeline and play this now. This is looking amazing. This is better than any simulation I did before. If you look at it, it's just looking beautiful. Everything is perfect and no pinching. Go to the shading preview of this. Now you can go to the rendered view to get the different colors. Go back to the solid mode, and now I want a still version of this thing after frame 190. So how can I do that? First, let's duplicate this object and bring it back to its original position. Okay, what's happening? So you cannot duplicate objects like that, okay. I'm gonna delete the duplicate of it. So first, to get a still version of this, you don't need to bake again, just Shift S cursor to select it, Shift add in a cube here and move it to the simulation collection. Rename it to sim still version. Still, and now go to geometry nodes, create a new geometry node system for that and make it still. In the group input, I'm gonna get my simulation object relative connected to the output, and that is gonna be it. Select the sim still object, Control A visual geometry to mesh, and go to properties now, and that is gonna be it. You've got the geometry, which is looking pretty good. If you look at it, these are all quads because we applied the subdivisional surface on cubes and then instanced them, all of that stuff, and this is looking good. So on the frame 190, I want this to appear, so add in a viewports and render keyframe here and it will be checked here. So then go to 189 and hide these two and insert the keyframe. Then I'm going to select my simulation object here, turn on these two on this and go to 190 frame, turn off these two on this and insert the keyframe. Now we're replacing between those two. So I'm going to select my sim still object and then select the sole object, Control P to parent it to the sole. So when it goes up, the simulation object is going to go up with it. It pops and yeah, this is it. Play it from the beginning. Looks good. Oh, the frame rate is dropping. But there is a motion that I'm getting here. You can see this one, which I don't really like. So we're gonna fix this with the graph editor. And this is all about this camera controller. So okay, let's go right there and see what is actually wrong with it. but the rotation here, let's hit double R, go like that, and scale it up maybe just like that. Insert location, rotation, and scale. Now play this. Go back, pop, and come back, and go, and just like that. So maybe in this keyframe, the 331, I'm gonna move the camera up a little bit. So it's the same as the first one, insert location, rotation, and scale. Let's play it again. Yep, this is what I wanted. I'm gonna select the camera controller here, and when it goes back a little bit, let's scale it up just like that. Insert scale, location, rotation, scale, everything. And right here, I'm gonna scale it down a little bit and insert the keyframes. Let's play it again. Okay, this needs to be a little bit different. So in the middle, I'm going to insert location, rotation, and scale on this object, the camera controller, and bring this second keyframe right there on top of this one. So it'll be replaced. And play this now. So there's a slight movement, you can see it. And let's scale it up just like that a little bit and insert it. So I'm gonna go to the outliner and turn on the shoe body right there and turn it on for the render. So if we go back, this is the knitting effect on there. I don't want the knitting effect before this keyframe, so okay, let's select the body object and go to geometry nodes, and we had a switch here, so I'm gonna go to geometry nodes first and unmute the nodes that we muted before. This is very important because need to double check these. M to unmute those and M to unmute this one too. Then I'm gonna go to the timeline again by clicking L on the keyboard, turn the switch down to 0, and this is the knitting effect, and go like that. So if you select the knitting control object right there, go down, click knitting control, and we got the keyframes on there. So the knitting is starting on this frame and I want it to start over here. So I'm going to select all the keyframes, bring it back to 260 or something, and just like that. Now if I play this, the frame rate is dropping, but we gotta work with that. So it comes here, and when it comes here, I want it to be in the middle. So grab these keyframes along the y-axis just like that, and this is gonna be okay for the render. And if I play this and go and finish the knitting, that is gonna be it for the knitting, and the camera needs to be resetted at this point right there. So I'm gonna select these two keyframes, bring them back to 320. But before bringing it back to 320, you have to select all the other objects with it. So select everything again, select all of these keyframes here, bring it back to 320 right there. Go to the camera view again and play this now. So this is what I want. But in here, after the 320, I don't want this object to appear. So this is coming out of the mesh just a little bit. So what we can do here is go to the sculpt node and hold shift and just paint on this. It will get the smooth brush and smooth the geometry inside there. And now it's not coming outside, so this is good. Don't do this with the simulation object because we don't have any covering on top of them and they're just fine. Just don't play with it. Now on the 321, I want to hide my simulation still object. Go to the render visibility here, turn it off for both of those, go back, and it will be turned on just like that. So in the 320 it's turned on and in the 321 it's turned off. So this is how it's gonna look like. And this is what we got so far. If you see the viewport is on 6-7 FPS, what would you do now? Because the viewport is slow. For that, what I suggest is first go to the render settings and make it JPEG or something, and just a very low quality thing, you know. Then go to the resolution, make it something like 50. Then I'm gonna go right there to the output folder and create a new folder on your desktop. This is gonna be the preview folder, and double click on that, accept. I'm gonna save the file and you can turn off the simplify now. Go to frame 246 and right there for the body I'm gonna go to the visibility and hide the viewports and renders for this right there. Then on the 247 turn it on just like that and insert the keyframes. Turn off the overlays and view viewport render animation. And it's gonna render all of our animation in the solid view or material view if you want to, and it will be very fast. So we can preview all of our animations in real time, I mean in its real speed, so that we can decide what to do with the keyframes later and what problems do we have in the animation. Now, to view your animations, hit Ctrl and F11, or you can go to Render and View Animation. So that's the shortcut, Ctrl F11. Play it, and this is how it's gonna look like in the final render. Pretty good. Okay, I think I found the problem here. Just a little bit of a trick here, but it's gonna help. It's gonna make it a little bit better. So when it goes like that, this is very fast, and I'm gonna turn off the geometry nodes modifier for now. Go back and turn on the simplify again to make the viewports smoother, and now it goes like that, very fast. But let's fix that. So I'm going to select the second keyframe and bring it right there to 150. And I'm going to scale it down a little bit, just like that. Insert, location, rotation, and scale. And I'll just do that. RXX. Just go for something like that. Insert, location, rotation, and scale, and play it again. RXX. Give it something like that now. Insert, location, rotation, and scale. And go back. Let's make this one something like that. Insert, location, rotation, and scale. Oh, this is looking good. The next thing I would like to do is select the body object, turn on the geometry node system on that, and when it goes like that, I don't like this type of angle here, so I would like to rotate it a little bit. Or y-axis, just like that, and insert rotation, or whatever you want to insert. So if we play this now, this actually looks better. What you can also do is, if you think these threads are less, so go to geometry nodes, we have the threads right there, bring up the density to something like 2000 or something. It looks better. So now if we go to view, viewport, render animation again, and let's see how that looks like. Okay, let's remove that, Control F11. It's a little bit different, but you can make it better. I spent a lot of time on my first demo. I tried different things, but in the tutorial you cannot try different things because you have to set a time for yourself and do all the things. You know what I mean? So I didn't have much time in the tutorial, but you're free to do anything with it. You just got the idea of the whole animation. Now you can polish it as you want. Feel free to do changes and apply your own stuff, make different shots, because even if you mess up, you can always start over and do it again, because you are in a learning process, and if you have time, this is going to be very good for you. And I hope you learned something new from this tutorial. So okay, let's see what mistakes do we have still. Let's fix the render views, and one thing I want to do is add focus, the focus control object. I want it to work now. Go to the properties and the constraints tab right there. I'm gonna go to the glass leaf collection, and here we have the depth of field glass. Now what you want to do is select the camera first, go to the depth of field and turn it on. Let's go back to frame 0, and if you play this, by the way, if your PC is not that powerful, you can go to the solid view and then right here turn on depth of field, so you can even preview it from here. So over here I want to shift the depth of field empty to the shoe. So for that, let's go to the object constraints tab, and I'm gonna add in another child of constraint. And now in the frame 78, let's insert a keyframe for that. Go one frame ahead and bring down the influence for that to 0. Then I'm gonna go to the second child of constraint, and let's select our strap object. Set inverse, and on the 79th frame, I'm gonna insert in a keyframe here. Then I'm gonna go back to 78th frame and bring back the influence for that and insert the keyframe again. So now if you play this, this is how it's gonna look like. Now if I move my strap just like that, the object is gonna move with it. Okay, let's animate the depth of field glass object. I'm gonna go to the 3D viewport right there and move it from there. So when it goes over here, I want it to move right there. So insert a location keyframe for it on the 79, the location. I'm gonna go a few frames ahead to 81 or something and bring it right there in the location. So if you play this now, this is how it's gonna look like. This thing is a little bit blurry now, so I'm gonna go to the depth of field again and bring up the f-stop to something like 0.3 or 0.4, whatever you like. So just like that, insert location for it. And now in this one, I'm gonna grab it right there to the leaf and insert location again. Move it just like that, grab it here, insert location. And I'm gonna grab it here, insert location. And when it goes out of the frame, I'm gonna bring it back to the shoe and insert location. Then it goes like that. I'm gonna bring it here, insert location. Just move through your scene and locate your empty. So it's like that. So let's see where it is. So I'm gonna bring it right in there. focus on that in the location, and then go back and bring it right here on this side, just like that, in the location again. And if you play this, so when it comes here, you need to take care of that. So on the 280, the last frame of this view, I'm going to insert location. On the first frame of this view, I'm going to bring it back right there so that you can see this detail here in the location. Play this and bring it up with the effect like that in the location, and right here in the location again, in the location, and I'm gonna just leave it at that point in the location. On the 320, I'm gonna use that location again, and 321, let's position it on the front just like that, and I think this is gonna be good. So in that location again, and if you go to the rendered view, it's looking pretty good. Okay, I'm gonna go to my shoe, go to the shading tab, and let's bring the saturation value down a little bit. So if I bring down the value, it's gonna be black. Okay, let's bring it down to 0.7 or 0.8. This is looking good. Go to the properties, come down to the color management, high contrast, and in the exposure, let's bring it down slightly, -0.2. Okay, let's go to the specular and add in a math mode here. Let's set it to add or something. I'm gonna bring down the value to 0.7, and this is looking normal now. I'm gonna render it in 128 samples. You can do your render in whatever you want because we don't have that much detail in the scene. Go to the output properties, I think, make the render something like 100%, 30 FPS. Now go to the output, select another one for the render, accept PNG, go to the compression, make it 0. Save the file again. Now if you're rendering and you turned on this override thing, and let's say you rendered 50 frames and somehow your Blender crashed or something happened, then you don't need to just type in 50 here and start from the frame 50. You can just turn off this button and it will automatically start your render from 50. Turn off simplify. Just don't use motion blur for this because this glass object is gonna act very weird. I tried it and I rendered like all night, and I woke up and saw the render. The glass was looking terrible. So just turn that off. We don't need it for this one. Then you can go into other software, whatever you want, After Effects or Premiere Pro, maybe DaVinci. You can add the motion blur from there, but I would not suggest to use this one. In the performance, let's turn on the persistent data. Save the file, and I can go to the shading for this one, and in the make it 40 maybe, and okay, go to the material preview mode, and now you can animate it too, just like that. So you can type in hash frame divided by some number, like divided by 50, and I'm gonna just connect my principled BSDF again, and this was it for the glass material. You can add in a subdivisional surface for this object, but I think it's out of focus most of the times, so you may not need this, but it is looking good. Yep, the shadows and stuff will look pretty good, so I think you need to turn that on. Shade it smooth, shade smooth, and now this is looking good. Go to the timeline again, turn that off in the viewport, and this is the render button, so turn it on like that. And this is it. What else do we need? In the compositing, we have an alpha over, which decides our background color. What if we turn on transparent glass effect on that? Go to the film, turn on transparent glass. Okay, this is looking different. Oh, this is kind of nice. Better than the first one. You can do whatever you want. The first version or the second one, just whatever you like. Let's saturate it a little bit. So go to the shading tab and in there, let's bring up the saturation to 0.8. There's a little bit of problem. So here is our gradient control object. I'm selecting it, and now when our object moves up there, the little part of the shoe is disappearing. So when it goes up, just like that, I'm gonna bring up my object with it. So insert a location keyframe for the gradient control object, and when it goes up just like that, you need to go to the rendered view, and you see this right there. Just bring it up a little bit and grab it near to the shoe so it covers all of the parts of it. Insert location keyframe. You gotta do this again when it comes down, so go back to the frame where it's coming down. So right here I'm gonna duplicate my keyframe from there to 319 and get the first one duplicated to the 320 right there. Shade smooth this object, and this was all of it, and I'll see you in the next one.